Chapter 40. Treadon Nelson. The ride to XC Energy was a new level of terror for Treadon. Gabe had pulled out of the driveway on his motorcycle, and something about the deep rumble of another engine brought out Jaren's competitive streak. Jaren and Gabe drove recklessly fast, glancing at each other at the stoplights, tires squealing when the lights turned green. By the time they reached the off-ramp to the XC Energy building, Treadon was sure his skin was the same color as the green light. Not bad. Jaren slowed and let the engine idle at the stop sign, letting Gabe roll his bike beside the car. That's a nice machine. Gabe examined the car. With a little more control behind the wheel, you could really move. Jaren blustered. I'll show you control, old man. Treadon closed his eyes and gripped the door handle as the roar of engines and Jaren's laughter rolled over him. The acceleration threw him back against the seat, but the nightmare only lasted a few seconds. The car stopped with a wrenching jerk, the seatbelt digging into his shoulder. His head whipped forward. He opened one eye. They'd made it to their destination. In front of them was the large black iron gate with the XC in the middle. Behind the gate, the building rose into the night sky, but it wasn't the dark abandoned building Treadon expected. Every window glowed with an unnatural light, a moving, shifting light that danced in the glass and created moving shadows in the parking lot. Looks like a party, Jaren said, still inside the car. My invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. The rattling of Gabe's engine shook Treadon's teeth as the bike pulled next to the car, Gabe's hand clamping down on Treadon's door, like a vice. This isn't what I was expecting. You two need to get out of here before you're seen. Give me the key to the building and get back to the house. What? Jaren yelled over the noise of the motors, even though Gabe's voice hadn't been drowned out. Use the key now? Sure thing. Jaren moved fast, swiping his keycard across the pad and pulling forward as the gate swung open. Gabe revved his engine, like a swear word, being forced to wait until Jaren was through. As soon as the gate was wide enough, Jaren shifted gears and pressed the gas, the Aston Martin shooting forward, leaving Treadon's stomach behind. Gabe was faster, passing them on the bike, pulling in front of them with a 180 turn on the back wheel, and coming to a dead stop in front of them. Jaren slammed on the brakes. The tires hissed as they skidded across the pavement, searching for purchase. The seatbelt was the only thing that kept Treadon from flying over the windshield onto Gabe's lap. Fast bike. I think he was taking it easy on me on the way here. Despite the joke, Jaren's voice was as tight as a calf muscle cramp. Gabe got off his bike, his knees an inch from the bumper. He crossed his arms and glared at them. The muscles in his arms bulged under his black shirt, his face a chiseled mask of determination. He took a breath, his lungs filling, making his chest even larger. Wait here. Gabe's command reached them with a physical force. Treadon felt like the words slammed into him and pushed him back against his seat. Jaren's only reaction was a tightening of his fingers on the steering wheel. Treadon tried to sit forward, but felt like Gabe's words still held him back. Gabe turned, and Treadon could see his confidence that his orders would be obeyed. Treadon wasn't so sure. Jaren leaned forward, fighting whatever force held them pinned. Gabe seemed to sense the struggle and turned. But then a deep laughter echoed around the parking lot. The thrumming of the laughter reverberated off the lamppost and emanated from the ground. Jaren looked up. Gabe froze in his tracks. Treadon listened. It wasn't the laughter of amusement or irony or even an intimidation factor. The laughter was full of the raucous joy of a victor standing over his opponent. The sound ended as abruptly as it had begun, as if the sound had been recalled. All echoes sucked back into the mouth that gave them birth. Beyond Gabe's still form, Treadon could make out the silhouette of a man standing in front of the brightly lit doors over 50 yards away. He was only a shadow against the dancing light, but Treadon could feel an energy, a power emanating from the man. The body type was tall, broad shoulders, oval head. It wasn't Xander Calivan. I was hoping you'd make it, Gabriel Tuor. You've been missing for so long. I was worried you'd miss the beginning of the end. Gabe didn't respond, but his hands lifted, reaching for the swords strapped to his back. Your long quest should end with a hero's welcome. The silhouetted man raised his arms out in front of him, head tilted back. Gabe moved, faster than Treadon's eyes could register. Gabe's swords were in his hands as he sprinted across the parking lot toward the front door. The man waited, unmoving. Treadon felt a strange rumbling. His reflection quivered in the rearview mirror. When he looked toward the building, the lights from the first-story windows were blocked out as a moving mass rose out of the ground. Gabe skidded to a stop as the blackness converged on him. Treadon could make out the shape of animals, sick-looking creatures with sharp teeth and long claws on their stubby front legs. Treadon unbuckled his seatbelt and pushed the door open. He had no plan, no weapon, but he wasn't about to sit here and watch those creatures tear Gabe apart. "Shut the door." Jaren's voice was calm, his fingers loose. One hand relaxed on the steering wheel, the other on the gear stick, his face a mask of confidence. "You've never seen me really drive, have you?" His choice between the horde of animals and Jaren's driving made him pause for a moment. He'd faced Jaren's driving before, and he could face it again, and if it meant getting to Gabe faster, Treadon wasn't even going to let himself close his eyes. Treadon closed the door and put his seatbelt back on, surprised when Jaren pulled his seatbelt on as well. Jaren pushed a button on his dashboard and the roof closed over their heads. The first wave of creatures attacked Gabe. The double-edged swords flashed in the silver light, and deformed creatures fell to the ground, dissipating into black dust. There was a sudden pull of momentum as Jaren put the car into gear and pressed the accelerator. They approached the massive creatures, going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. The creatures became more defined. Slimy black hair slicked back against their bodies, white foam dripping from their teeth and sides of their mouths. The front of the car smashed into the line of beasts with a crunching sound, followed by a blinding flash of light. Treadon heard loud hissing sounds and smelled burned flesh, smoke, and rancid air. Streaks of light shot from all sides of the Aston Martin, catching the deformed dog-like creatures in its brilliant flares. Another streak of light connected to the skull of a creature right next to Treadon's window. The entire animal turned gray and then disintegrated into the air. The car broke through the pack of beasts, and Jaren slammed the brakes, jerking the wheel sharply so the car spun in a circle, leaving 4 crescent-shaped tire marks on the pavement. What was that? Treadon gripped the handle and side of the seat like lifesavers in a stormy ocean. Jaren smiled wide, showing teeth. That was level 10. I guess we don't have to test it on freshmen after all. The animals turned at the sight of the car spewing lightning. Their attention only seemed to encourage Jaren, and he forced his foot down on the gas again. White smoke billowed from the tires. The smell of burnt rubber filled the air. A few brave creatures advanced from the pack, and when they were only a few feet away, Jaren slipped the car into gear, launching them forward. The first 2 creatures flew up and over the top of the car, the streak of electricity catching both dog-like beasts in the air. They disintegrated before they hit the ground. Then the electrifying Aston Martin was in the heart of the horde again. Jaren didn't slow down, speeding from one end of the parking lot to the other, spinning in dizzying patterns and chasing down confused creatures that got separated from the main group. Treadon found himself leaning forward, adjusting his body to the shifting force of the car, pointing out where the Fenris were regrouping so Jaren could scatter them again. His fear, his anxiety, seemed buried in the moment of this battle. He could almost forget he'd ever been afraid. It only took Jaren and his car a few minutes to purge the parking lot of the devilish forms. The last 3 creatures seemed disoriented as the headlights bore down on them. They each headed in a different direction and ended up running into each other. Jaren jerked the wheel at the last minute and caught 2 of the creatures with the side paneling right below Treadon's window. The third looked ready to launch itself at the car when a sword swiped through the creature's neck. Gabe stood there half-bent, swords held in front of him like some kind of superhero that had dropped from the sky. That was insane. Treadon took deep breaths. "Are you okay?" Jaren asked. Treadon couldn't stop the smile from spreading across his face. "That was awesome." "See, I knew you'd come around. Now we can get you on Puff the Magic Dragon Kitty ride at the theme park. You know how bad I've been wanting to ride that with you." Treadon laughed and opened the door. Gabe approached the side of the car before Treadon could get out, sheathing his swords. "I thought I told you to go home." "I practically lived here when I was growing up. It's home to me," Jaren said, shrugging. "Where did you learn to drive like that?" Gabe placed a finger and ran it along the edge of the door. "I wouldn't touch that." Treadon's warning went unheeded. The car didn't electrocute Gabe. Nothing happened, except for a small glow on the paneling where Gabe's finger made contact. "Where did you learn to drive like that?" Gabe asked Jaren again. "Driver's ed," Jaren said flatly. Gabe opened his mouth to say something else, but the sound of squealing tires made them all turn to look at the building. A black sedan came around the parking lot, speeding toward the gate, turning with enough force to put the car up on 2 wheels. "That's him," Gabe said. "I have to follow him. Don't go in the building without me." "Sure thing." Jaren gave Gabe a salute and leaned back in the driver's seat like he was ready to listen to a podcast on a relaxing drive to the beach. Treadon could see how torn Gabe was between staying and making sure they followed directions, or following the man who was behind the Fenris. There was a deep yearning in Gabe's eyes that was more than a desire for revenge. He'd been waiting for this moment for years. "Go. I'll keep him in line," Treadon nodded. Gabe closed his eyes. They both knew it wasn't the promise Gabe wanted, but the car was approaching the gate. Gabe squared his shoulders and turned. He took 3 steps, bounding, almost like he was walking on the moon, and then he jumped, pushing off the ground with incredible force. He flew up through the dark night, pulling his swords from their scabbards in midair. He landed on the speeding car, knocking the car back onto all 4 tires, slamming one sword down through the roof. He held the protruding sword, leaning against it for leverage. His relaxed stance made him look like he was riding a snowboard across a black expanse. His face turned toward Treadon. His mouth didn't move, but Treadon heard the words on the wind. "Wait for me." The car approached the gates at breakneck speed. The gate had only partially opened, but the driver didn't even tap the brakes. The car scraped through the small opening, sparks flying from the friction between the car and the opening iron gates. Then the car, with Gabe still riding on top, disappeared into the darkness, leaving Jaren and Treadon staring after them, with a glowing building behind them, in a parking lot that smelled of burning rubber and scorched flesh, ash drifting around their feet.